Black July is the common name used to refer to the anti-Tamil pogrom and riots in Sri Lanka during July 1983. The riots began as a response to a deadly ambush on 23 July 1983 by the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, a Tamil militant group, that killed 13 Sri Lanka army soldiers. Beginning in the capital Colombo on the night of 24 July 1983, anti-Tamil pogroms spread to other parts of the country. Over 7 days, mobs of mainly Sinhalese attacked Tamil targets, burning, looting and killing. Estimates of the death toll range between 400 and 3,000. 8,000 homes and 5,000 shops were destroyed. 150,000 people were made homeless. The economic cost of the riots was $300 million. A wave of Sri Lankan Tamils fled to other countries in the ensuing years, and many thousands of Tamils youths joined militant groups. Black July is generally seen as the start of full-scale Sri Lankan civil war between the Tamil militants and the government of Sri Lanka. July has become a time of remembrance for the Sri Lankan Tamil diaspora community around the world. Background: during the colonial period, many Sri Lankan Tamils, particularly those from the Jaffna Peninsula, took advantage of educational facilities established by missionaries and the British policy of divide and rule, which placed minorities in positions of power in colonies, and soon dominated the civil service and other professions. When Sri Lanka became independent in 1948, a majority of government jobs were held by Tamils, who were a minority of the country's population. The elected leaders saw this as the result of a British stratagem to control the majority Sinhalese, and deemed it a situation that needed correction. In 1956, the Official Language Act was introduced. Hitherto English, spoken by only 5% of the population, had been the sole official language, with the use of Sinhala and Tamil being severely restricted. Protests against the Sinhala-only policy by Tamils and by the leftist parties were met with mob violence that eventually snowballed into the riots of 1958. The implementation of the Sinhala-only Act deprived the Tamil populations in the north and east of the country of their right to fully integrate into government institutions, and was the foremost injustice brought upon the ethnic minority group. In 1958, the Tamil political leadership acquiesced to a formula of Sinhala as the official language, but with the reasonable use of Tamil. Only the leftist parties opposed this, holding out for parity of status between the two languages. However, after the Tamil people gave an overwhelming mandate to the Tamil nationalist Ilankai Tamil Arasu Katchi, which had agreed to a subordinate status for the Tamil language, the leftist parties eventually abandoned parity of status. Throughout the 1960s, protests and state repression against these protests created further animosity. In 1972, the policy of standardization that affected Tamils' entry into universities strained the already tenuous political relationship between the elite Civ, the Tamil and Sinhalese communities. The quota entitlement in political representation became another cause for contention between Sinhala and Tamil people. There was also a series of ethnic riots in 1977 following the United National Party coming to power. In 1981, the renowned public library in Jaffna was burnt down by a violent mob. The Jaffna Library was well known at the time as a nexus of Tamil activity, with various Tamil groups vying for control. Until 1983, there were similar incidents of low-level violence between the government and the mushrooming Tamil militant groups, with a significant number of murders, disappearances and cases of torture attributed to both sides. On 23 July 1983, at around 11:30 p.m., the rebel Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam ambushed the 4-4 Bravo military patrol in Tirunelveli near Jaffna in northern Sri Lanka. A roadside bomb was detonated beneath the jeep that was leading the convoy, injuring at least 2 soldiers on board. As soldiers traveling in a truck which was following the jeep dismounted to help their colleagues, They were ambushed by a group of Tamil Tiger fighters, who fired at them with automatic weapons and hurled grenades at them. In the ensuing clashes, 1 officer and 12 soldiers were killed immediately, while 2 more were fatally wounded, bringing the total death toll to 15 along with a number of rebels. Kichu, a regional commander of the LTTE, later admitted to planning and carrying out the ambush. Sunday 24 July, the army, including its commander Tisawi Ratunga, didn't want the soldiers' funeral held in Jaffna, and they didn't want to hand the bodies over to their families to avoid disturbances at multiple locations. The decision was made at the highest levels to hold the funeral, with full military honours, at Colombo's General Cemetery at Kannata. Prime Minister Ranasinghe Premadasar, fearing violence, had been against holding the funeral in Colombo, but President J.R. Jayewardena overruled him. The President, Prime Minister and the rest of the cabinet were to attend the funeral, which would take place at 5 p.m. on the 24th of July. This was going against standard procedure, where the fallen members of the armed forces were buried in their home villages. Preparations were made for the funeral, and the riot squad at Barela police station were put on standby. But by 5 p.m. the bodies hadn't arrived in Colombo. The soldiers' families wanted the bodies handed over to them to be buried according to tradition. Procedural issues meant that the bodies were still at Palali Army Camp near Jaffna. The bodies eventually left Palali Air Force Base shortly after 6 p.m. Back at Colombo General Cemetery, tension grew due to the delays, and a large crowd, including around 3,000 people from the Wanathmula slum, started gathering at the cemetery, angered by news of the ambush, which was magnified by wild rumor. The Avro plane carrying the bodies arrived at Ratmalana Airport at 7:20 p.m., by which time the crowd at the cemetery had swollen to more than 8,000. The crowd were agitating for the bodies to be handed over to families rather than buried at the cemetery. Violence broke out between the crowd and police, and the riot squad were called in. They fired tear gas at the crowd and Batin charged them before handing control of the situation over to the army. The president then decided to cancel the military funeral and hand the bodies over to the families. The bodies had left Ratmalana at 8:30 p.m. and were heading for the cemetery before they were diverted to the army headquarters so that they can be handed over to the families. The crowd at the cemetery were informed of the president's decision at around 10 p.m. The crowd left the cemetery in a restive mood. A section of the crowd marched up D.S. Senanayaka Mawatha to nearby Borella, where they destroyed Tamil-owned Nagalingam stores. The mob, which was now around 10,000, attacked, looted and set fire to any building near Borella Junction that had a Tamil connection, including Borella Flats and the Tamil Union Cricket and Athletic Club. Then houses belonging to Tamils in the neighborhood were targeted. The police fired tear gas at the crowd, but after exhausting all the stock were forced to fire rifles into the air. The crowd then dispersed in the direction of D. Matagoda, Maradana, Narayanpeta, Grampass and Thimbirigatuyar, where they attacked and looted Tamil properties and set them on fire. Members of underworld criminal gangs then joined in. Monday 25 July, President Jayewardena met the country's Security Council at President's House, Colombo at 9:30 a.m. on the 25th of July. 100 yards away at the Bristol building, the Tamil-owned Ambal Cafe was ablaze. Also close by on York Street, the Tamil-owned clothier, Sarathas, was ablaze as well. Soon all the Tamil-owned shops on Bailey Street, opposite the President's house, were on fire. Every Tamil-owned business in the fort area was on fire by the time the Security Council meeting finished. The President ordered a curfew in Colombo from 6 p.m. The mob moved on to Olcott Mawatha, where the Tamil-owned Thosai Boutique and Andabarwan Oil Man store, Rajeswari stores and Ajin the hotel were set on fire. The rioting had spread to the slums of Canal Bank, Gram Pass, Hatiuta, Kirapone, Kota Hena, Maradana, Modera, Mutawil, Narayanpeta, Slave Island and Wanathmula by 10 a.m. Mobs armed with crowbars and kitchen knives roamed the streets, attacking and killing Tamils. Wellawata and Dehiwala, which contained the largest number of Tamils in Colombo, were the next target of the mob. Homes and shops were attacked, looted and destroyed. Tamil shops on Main Street and Bowtree Junction were also attacked. The riots then spread to the middle-class residential areas of Anderson Flats, LVT Gala Flats, Torrington Flats and Thimbirigatiya. Tamils' targets in the exclusive Cinnamon Gardens were also attacked, as were those in the suburbs of Kadawatha, Kelaniya, New Jagoda and Ratmalana. The residence of the Indian High Commissioner was attacked and ransacked. By lunchtime virtually the entire city was on fire. The curfew was brought forward to 4 p.m. and then to 2 p.m. and was extended to Gampaha district due to the violence spreading as far as Negombo. In Kalutara the TKVS stores was set on fire. The owner jumped out of an upstairs window but the mob threw him back into the fire. The curfew was extended to Kalutara district. The police were unwilling, or unable to enforce the curfew. The army was then called in to help the police. The rioters were now becoming organized, using voter registration lists to target Tamils. 81 out of the 92 Tamil-owned flats at Soysaw Flats were attacked, looted and set on fire. The mob attacked the industrial areas of Ratmalana, which contained a number of Tamil-owned factories. Yetro Garments and Tata Garments on Gall Road were completely gutted. Other factories attacked included Pons, Eslon, Reeves Garments, Hyder Garments, Hiluk Garments, AGM Garments, Manhattan Garments, Ploypec, Berwick and Mascons Asbestos. Indian-owned factories such as Kundan Mills, Oxford and Baxon Garments were not attacked, giving credence to the suggestion that the mob was deliberately going after Sri Lankan Tamil targets. 17 factories were destroyed in Ratmalana. Capital Maharaja, a Tamil-owned company, is one of Sri Lanka's largest conglomerates. 6 of their factories in Ratmalana, their headquarters in Bankshal Street and their Hetirachi were destroyed. The mob ended the day by setting fire to Tilly's Beach Hotel in Mount Lavinia. One of the most notorious single incident of the riots took place at the Welakada prison on the 25th of July. 37 Tamil prisoners, most of them detained under the Prevention of Terrorism Act, were killed by Sinhalese prisoners using knives and clubs. Survivors claimed that the prison officers allowed their keys to fall into the hand of the Sinhalese prisoners, while at the subsequent inquest, the prison officers claimed the keys were stolen from them. Outside of the Western Province, there was violence in Gaul, Kigala, Trincomalee and Vavuniya on the 25th of July. The mobs were equipped with voter registration lists, thereby giving credence to an organized attack with support at government level, burning and attacking mainly Tamil residences and business, while army and government officials were deployed late. While a number of Tamils fled the city, many of the Sinhalese and Muslim people saved the lives and properties of many Tamils despite the activities of the gangs. Many Tamils were sheltered in government buildings, temples as well as Sinhalese and Muslim houses during the following days. Tuesday the 26th of July the mob continued their attacks in Wellawata and Dehiwala on the 26th of July. There were 53 houses on Ratnakara Road. The 24 Tamil-owned, occupied houses were burnt. 3 houses were owned by Sinhalese but were rented by Tamils. The mob removed the property in these 3 houses to the road and burnt it. These 3 houses weren't burnt down, as weren't the 26 Sinhalese-owned, occupied houses. In many parts of the city, the army merely looked on as property were destroyed and people killed. The violence spread to the country's second-largest city, Kandy, on the 26th of July. By 2:45 p.m. Delta Pharmacy on Peradeniya Road was on fire. Soon afterwards, a Tamil-owned shop near the Lakshala building was set on fire, and the violence spread to Castle Street and Colombo Street. The police managed to get control of the situation, but an hour later a mob armed with petrol cans and Molotov cocktails started attacking Tamil shops on Castle Street, Colombo Street, Kings Street and Trincomalee Street. The mob then moved on to nearby Gampola. A curfew was imposed in Kandy district on the evening of the 26th of July. In Trincomalee, false rumors started spreading that the LTTE had captured Jaffna. The Karinagar naval base had been destroyed and that the Naga Vihari had been desecrated. Sailors based at Trincomalee Naval Base went on a rampage, attacking Central Road, Dockyard Road, Main Street and North Coast Road. The sailors started 170 fires before returning to their base. The Sivan Hindu temple on Thirignasambandan Road had been attacked. The curfew was extended nationwide on the 26th of July as a precautionary measure, as there were more outbreaks of violence against Tamils in areas where various ethnic groups lived together and looting. By the evening of the 26th of July, the mob violence began to slacken off, as the police and army patrolled the street in large numbers and began to take action against the rioters. The soldiers killed in the Tirunelveli ambush were quietly buried during the night curfew. Wednesday, the 27th of July, in the central province, the violence spread to Nawalapitiya and Hattin. Badulla, the largest city in neighboring UVA province, had so far been peaceful. At around 10:30 a.m. on the 27th of July, a Tamil-owned motorcycle was set on fire in front of the clock tower in Badulla. Around midday, an organized mob went through the city's bazaar area, setting shops on fire. The rioting then spread to the city's residential areas where the homes of many Tamils were burnt down. The mob then left the city in vans and buses they had stolen and headed for Bandarawela, Haliela and Welamada, where they set properties on fire. The riot had spread to Lunugala by nightfall. The daytime curfew was lifted in Colombo on the 27th of July and the city started the day relatively calmly. At Fort Railway Station, a train heading for Jaffna was stopped as it was pulling out of Platform 1 after cartridges were found on the track. Sinhalese passengers on the train started attacking Tamil passengers, killing 12. Some Tamils were burnt alive on the railway tracks. Following the riot at Welakada prison on the 25th of July, Tamil prisoners had been moved from the chapel ward to the youth offenders building. On the evening of the 27th of July, Sinhalese prisoners overpowered their guards, armed themselves with axes and firewood, and attacked the Tamil prisoners in the youth offenders building, killing 15 Tamil prisoners. 2 Tamil prisoners and a third prisoner were killed during a riot at Jaffna prison on the same day. Thursday, the 28th of July, Badulla was still on fire on the 28th of July and the rioting spread from Lunugala to Pasara. There was also rioting in Nuwara Eliaram Chilor. Colombo, Kandy and Trincomalee were peaceful. President Jay Wardner and his cabinet met in an emergency session on the 28th of July, after which Jay Wardner made a prime-time televised address in which he appealed for an end to the violence. Jay Wardner blamed the violence on the deep ill feeling and suspicion that has grown between the Sinhalese and the Tamil people, caused by the calls for an independent Tamil state which began in 1976. The Tamil United Liberation Front, the largest political party representing the Tamils, had passed the Vadakodi resolution in 1976. He blamed the violence committed by the Tamil militants for the way the Sinhalese people themselves have reacted. Jayewardene vowed that the Sinhalese people will never agree to the division of a country which has been a united nation for 2,500 years, and announced the government would accede to the clamour of the Sinhalese people, and ban any party which sought to divide the nation. Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi called Jayewardene on 28 July and informed him of the impact the riots had had in India. She requested that Jayewardene receive Minister of External Affairs P.V. Narasimha Rao as her special envoy. Jayewardene accepted, and a few hours later Rao arrived in Sri Lanka. Friday 29 July. Colombo was still peaceful on 29 July. Tamil residents were visiting their friends and relatives who had taken refuge in the many refugee camps in the city. But at around 10:30 am, two Sinhalese youths were shot on Gasworks Street. A large crowd gathered at the scene, and soon rumours started circling that the youths had been shot by Tamil tigers in the Adamali building. The building was surrounded by the army, navy and police, who proceeded to fire at the building using submachine guns and semi-automatic rifles. A helicopter also fired machine gun at the building. The security forces stormed the building but didn't find any Tamil tigers, weapons or ammunitions inside. Wild rumors started spreading around Colombo that the army was engaged in a battle with the Tamil tigers. Panicking workers fled in any mode of transport they could find. Mobs started gathering in the streets, armed with axes, bricks, crowbars, iron rods, kitchen knives and stones, ready to fight the tigers. The tigers never came, so the mobs turned their attention to fleeing workers. Vehicles were stopped and searched for Tamils. Any Tamil they found was attacked and set on fire. A Tamil was burnt alive on Kerala Road. 11 Tamils were burnt alive on Attribution Road. The police found an abandoned van on the same road which contained the butchered bodies of 2 Tamils and 3 Muslims. Police shot dead 15 rioters. At 2 p.m. on 29 July, a curfew came into force which was to last until 5 a.m. on Monday 1 August. Badula, Kandy and Trincomalee were peaceful on 29 July, but there was violence in Nuwara area where, around midday, the Tamil-owned Gainson and Savalingam stores were attacked and set on fire. The violence then spread to Bizarre Street and Lawson Road in the city. Violence was also reported in Kegala district and Matara district. In Kegala district, the violence spread from D. Hiawatha to D. Raniyagala to Avasawala. In Matara district, the worst affected areas Deniyar and Morawake. There was violence in Chilor as well. Indian External Affairs Minister Rao held discussions with President Jayewardene and Foreign Minister A.C.S. Hamid before visiting Kandy by helicopter. Saturday 30 July, violence was reported in Nuwara Elia, Kandapola, Howrah Elia and Matale on 30 July. The rest of the country was quiet. That night the government banned 3 left-wing political parties, Communist Party of Sri Lanka, Janatha Vimudhi Peramuna and Navasama Samaja Party, blaming them for inciting the riots.